All righty, thank you, mayors, for participating in this panel. I have to start off with Mayor Lucas. Big Chiefs fan, big ESPN story on the mayor today. Can I get an early prediction on the Super Bowl?
Some of you who watched Saturday Night Live in the 80s and 90s may remember the super fans, and they would say, like, the Bears 80, whoever else 10. I won't be that extreme. I will say Chiefs 41, 49ers 28.
Okay, wow.
All right, we've got a few.
Okay, all right. Okay, I want to go down the line. Impeachment trial has begun, and that is the big topic, certainly, of Washington. And starting with you, Mayor Lucas, I want you to talk about one issue each that people back home, your constituents, are talking about. You can't pick the same one. So what's one big issue that your constituents are talking about if it's not impeachment?
And I will say impeachment is not the focus of any conversation back home in the Midwest. I think for us right now, the issue is violent crime. How do we make our community safer? Many of you might have seen that Kansas City had a great day on Sunday with a football game, but then there was a mass shooting in Kansas City shortly thereafter. And so that continues to be a key issue that we try to address each day.
Ms. Mayor?
Ditto, I can't take it. And I think that in Topeka, one of the things that we're talking a lot about is medical care. How do we ensure that everybody is taken care of? And we're excited about that. Kansas is finally talking about the expansion of Medicaid. But I think that there's so many citizens that are struggling to take care of their health so that they could be productive in our society, that's a really big topic of conversation.
Fairly hyper-local to Southeast Michigan, I think in our region, people are always focused on the economy. Having lived through a recession, still largely tied to the automobile industry. We've had a lot of good years, but there's some tremors out there, and I think most of the articles, most of the discussion is about where's the economy going in the next 6 to 12 months.
Mayor Barnett, just to follow up on that, America is aging right now. What have you found in your vicinity, in your city, of 50-plus people? What are the challenges they're facing? I mean, federally, there's a lot of challenges that Washington's going to have to tackle at some point. But what are the obstacles that they face, as well as healthcare and the fact that are we ready, both at the state and local issues, for the baby boomers to fully retire? Yeah.
Well, it's a great question. We spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I think as elected officials, you had 3 great mayors on the panel before. One thing I'm really proud of is the way I think local leadership is leading in this space and really trying to engage the senior population. Again, in Rochester Hills, as it relates to healthcare, one of the interesting things, you've seen some of the presidential candidates come through and talk about the price of prescription drugs and how the fact that you can go across the border to Canada and get things much cheaper than you can just across the bridge here in Metro Detroit. And so that's certainly an issue. But I think if I went back to my first answer, a lot of what we're really focused on is trying to include the senior population in the next economy, including them in the future, that they see a future in Rochester Hills. A lot of that might be, as we talked about earlier, about the discussion of how autonomous vehicles, how mobility is going to change for our senior population, how that can be a good thing, not something to be fearful of, but something that could embrace and extend their mobility into the later years of their lives. And so we spend a lot of time being very intentional about topics that are really important. I said earlier real quickly that whether it be autonomous vehicles, bringing them in to see that, or Michigan legalized marijuana this year. We brought weed into our senior center and explained to them what it was, where you can use it, what is permissible, what isn't. And so it's a little bit funny, but you saw a lot of learning happen with people go, oh, okay, this is something that's happening that's relevant, and we want to be intentional about including our seniors.
Mayor Isla, you have announced that you're running for Congress in the 2nd District.
Correct.
Why? Why do you want to come to the swamp?
Just after that.
So as mayor, one of the blessings that I've had is that I get a chance to engage with our constituents one-on-one on a regular basis. And when I have the conversations with them about the issues that matter the most, like we just discussed, impeachment is not one of them. When you look at what people in Kansas are concerned about is how are they going to pay their bills? We have an aging population that is going to have a lot of medical needs. I just spoke with somebody from Lecompton. He was telling me that Opdivo, a cancer medication, was $89,000 every 28 days. Okay? And as a person that has lupus, has cancer, and has had no health insurance, I understand the challenge of having to open up your mailbox and look at the pile of bills and try to figure out how you're going to deal with it and whether you're going to pay the house or who you're going to play with. The other thing that we're concerned about is the job situation. We talk about how wonderful our economy is. Wow, great unemployment records. When are we going to start talking about the fact that we have a significant amount of underemployment in our communities? When you look at Southeast Kansas, it's compelling to look at the people that are struggling to trying to find a job. And how are we talking about education? How are we going to start infusing programs that actually work to get people back to work? So these are things that are personal to me. I've been homeless. I know what it is not to have health insurance. I know what it is to struggle to pay those bills, and my credit showed it at one point in time. And I think that the citizens of Kansas, and especially in the 2nd Congressional District, where these challenges are so salient, need somebody that's going to go out there and going to stand up for them, understanding what those issues are, to make policies that work, and to start to debunk this system that says that we're going to put up our bootstraps and it's all going to work, because it's not true.
Along those lines, you were homeless as a teenager.
I was.
So explain the safety net that was or wasn't there for you.
So I always tell people that my story is not my story, it's your story. I had everything from my neighbor that I still call my mom, that fed me when I was a kid. Then it was Mami Pucci, who when I was, trying to get my life back together, she let me stay in a cot in her house. Then it was the dean that let me go back to school so that I could get in student loan debt, but I could pay some bills with that. And then there was Father Pat, that when I was singing at church, he was just like, hey, we're going to take care of you. We know that you're doing well, but we want to send you out of here. But all along my life, I didn't know how to navigate the systems that I have been able to overcome. I had people hold me by the hand and walk with me. And I think that that was the difference. It was all of the people that didn't have to care, that did for one reason or another, that blessed me immensely.
Mayor Lucas, you've had last year you held a forum on livability for 50-plus populations. What did you learn from that, and what programs do you have for people over 50?
I like to think that every program that we create in Kansas City, and I've been mayor for 5.5 months, and I'm proud of the fact that we've created a good number, try to be equitable in all ways, right? A lot of people have run for office lately talking about looking at things through a racial equity lens. I also think we need to look at things through a lens of age equity and making sure things are accessible. So other things you might have heard about. We have a Mayor's Ambassador program, which is an internship program for retirees. We have 3 folks that will be in the mayor's office working on any number of issues. Because one of the things that we were addressing recently, I'm planning to pardon 8,000 folks with marijuana convictions on their records at the misdemeanor level. And the hardest part, I agree, thank you. It is my counterpoint to Mayor Barnett bringing weed to the homes. I bring a pardon, so we're working together. There we go. The Michigan-Missouri compromise. But as part of that, it's vital for us to actually reach people. And we know that there are lots of folks out there that have so much that they want to give to their communities. That's just one. In Kansas City, we've also proposed, and we're finding our budget funding for zero fare transit, or an entirely free public transportation system. The goal there is very simple: to make sure that there aren't barriers to entry to folks of all ages, but particularly folks who rely on transit each day to get to that doctor's appointment, to get to some level of freedom, frankly. And so what I learned from that forum, and what I've learned from my time in office and campaigning, is that we have to make sure that everything we're looking at, make sure that everyone can avail themselves of the opportunities to be a citizen of Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Barnett, infrastructure, it's something that Washington has talked about a lot, but not as far as a comprehensive bill has not passed. Do you see that changing, and what does the effect of Washington not acting affect the local level?
Yeah. Let me start by saying that I should have added that when we brought the weed, we also brought it back with us. We didn't leave it there. just to leave that story with a little bit of a hang. I think that we were all really encouraged about where infrastructure might be this far into President Trump's presidency. And both the Republicans and the Democrats had promised some pretty significant infrastructure packages. Of course, we've seen zero from Washington. And so, you know, what mayors have to do, what city leaders have to do is, you know, you have a couple choices. It's really pretty simple. You can raise taxes, you can cut services, or you can innovate. And around infrastructure, in Michigan too, the governor ran and was elected largely on fixing the damn roads. And that was her slogan, trying to figure out a way to fix infrastructure. I think we've sort of recognized that our help is not going to come from Washington. And so we have to be innovative in how we approach it. What does that mean in my community in Rochester? Well, we looked at some of the things that we were funding and diverted funds. We said, okay, we don't need, when this bond falls off, we'll repurpose this for local road funding. We've tried to seek very specific sources of funding for our local streets. We've also entered into some unique sort of public-private partnerships. But infrastructure also is not just roads. You're talking earlier about inclusive communities, and one of the things that we're really proud of is trying to engage the senior community in all aspects of our life, right? Including play. We recognize when we thought about playgrounds, we thought about kids. I have kids. We thought about kids. Kids are going to like slides. Kids are going to like swings. Kids. And we recognize that who brings kids to the playground, right? A lot of times it's grandmas and grandpas. And so we now design all of our playgrounds with generational playgrounds, senior focused, immediately adjacent, if not combined with the children's playgrounds, so that you have this intergenerational opportunity. So infrastructure can be roads. We recognize Washington probably isn't going to do anything in the next year significant related to infrastructure. We've had to be innovative in how we approach that. But it's not just roads, it's also how you want your community to develop so that you're inclusive to everyone.
What if, one of you jump in about infrastructure at the local level? I mean, there have been numerous reports about just whether it's roads or highways or whatever, just crumbling. Do you see that in your cities?
Absolutely. I can tell you that we were just here in DC in December, I think, and we were talking to our delegation here in the federal level, and we have the Polk Quincy Viaduct. We are I-70, which is one of the most important corridors, especially for the bioagro industry. And we have a curve that when you look under it, A, the curve is extremely dangerous, and B, when you're under the bridge, there's pieces that fall. And when it rains, you see the rain come through. And as we've been talking with the state, we're trying to figure out how to do partnerships, but we need support. I mean, because that fix, I think, is $340 million. And it's significant. I mean, the problems that we're having with infrastructure in our communities are significant. And it's not just highways, and it's not just roads, it's also the bridges.
That's right.
You know, I might say one thing. I'll get to infrastructure in 1 second, but I so appreciate Mayor Barnett talking about the grandparents, in some situations, the great-grandparents who are taking care of young people, right? Our families, the way we live, the way our communities exist are different perhaps than they were 30, 40 years ago. In the inner city of Kansas City, throughout Kansas City, you have lots of folks who are primary guardians and are a senior age but are taking care of folks. And we need to think about literally everything we do. When we think of our places where people can play or recreate, you have to think about not just the 7-year-old, but the 70-year-old. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do more of as well. On infrastructure, we have the same challenges that everyone else has, and we try our best to be creative, but I said this recently. One challenge we face isn't so much from Washington, because I'll just tell you about how we all live in the hinterlands, and I'm proud to be from them, is that we don't even worry about y'all. We let you do your thing. I turn on the nightly news for a minute, I'm like, what? And then I just move back to a Chiefs game. But nevertheless, what I mean by that seriously though is that we really know that we have to come up with a lot of our own answers. But what we want is at least where we say this is a unique and pressing problem. The bridge that's collapsing, or the bridge that's closed down, or the only way we get around. We want to just actually be able to call Washington and say, look, there are resources for this. Just fund them. Just be consistent to what you did in at least the 80s or the 90s. And so much we're finding ourselves with fewer resources there, which is requiring our taxpayers to pay, I think, far more on sales taxes, local property taxes, which is fundamentally unsustainable long term.
In a few minutes, we'll open up to audience questions, so get your questions ready. I want to go back to the issue of homelessness, which of course affects all ages. The economy, by some standards, certainly is doing well. Unemployment rate is low. Stock market is at all-time high. But the amount of homeless is really striking, both anecdotally around here in D.C. And we had some experts at an event recently, and it was this is a real problem. And Mayor Barnett, let's start with you. What is the solution here?
Well, get your pens ready, because I've got the solution to homelessness. No, but for the grace of God, I don't deal with it in my community, much like some of my colleagues do. But as president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I would tell you that this is the issue of the day. And I can tell that by the fact that when we host this meeting this week, when we had a homelessness forum maybe 4 years ago, we'd get the first 2 rows. Now we can't find a room big enough, because not only is it expanded in traditionally cities that experience this, like Los Angeles and San Francisco, but it's happening in cities like Salt Lake and other places where before they might have a couple folks that they dealt with. They could almost deal with it like a family, like a church could deal with it. Now it's 200, it's 300. Before it was 30. Now in a place that it was 200, now it's 1,000. So this is the issue of the day. I think it's actually overtaken opioids as the thing that mayors are really focused on now. And certainly, I think there are a lot of mayors who are looking at some innovative solutions to how to deal with it, whether it be, from certainly as Mayor de Isla will talk to you about, the component that can't be left out is the mental health component that has to be an absolute part from the beginning of every homelessness discussion. But we have mayors that are working on zoning, we have mayors that are working on funding, we have mayors that are working on, from a civil rights perspective, what are some lessons and what are some things you should do, what are some things you shouldn't do. I don't think there's a solution yet, but you have a lot of mayors working really hard, because this is the top issue for most of the folks gathering this week in Washington. The mayors will be here, about almost 300 mayors. It's a topic that we're going to be speaking with. On Friday, we're in the White House with Secretary Carson, and so we're going to continue the discussion there. But we've got a lot of opportunities to continue this discussion.
Mayor de Isla?
So I think that when we talk about homelessness is a symptom, right? And we try to throw money at the homeless issue without addressing what the symptom is. One of my favorite analogies of this is you're fishing and you see a body go down the river and you pick it up and you see another body go down the river. But if you know that there's more bodies coming and you're not looking up the river, you have a problem, right? So we have to address the fact that there is a significant amount of individuals that are homeless because they have mental health issues that are not being addressed. And we also have individuals that for years have not been able to save. And then you are one medical crisis away from having to file bankruptcy. And then maybe not even being able, because you've moved from apartment to apartment, to find a place to live, so you all of a sudden become homeless. The other thing that we're not talking about, that I don't really hear a lot of people talk about, is the fact that there's a lot of women that are homeless because they've been victims of human trafficking. And there are so many root causes that because they're so difficult, we're not really looking at them and addressing them and conversing about them. And there's this myth that in this country, if you work really hard, you're going to move ahead. But it's not. Being poor is expensive. It's extremely expensive, which is why we have so much homelessness. Because when you don't know where to look for the help, and where the help is not afforded in the right place, you perpetuate the problem.
I was just going to say, let the church say amen. I'm with that. I think the mayor identifies 2 areas, and this is how we usually attack homelessness in Kansas City. One is the mental health, substance abuse, significant challenge. The other is, frankly, the housing insecurity, you are one bill away, you're one challenge away sort of thing. And we need to realize, when us mayors, we love to all talk about economic development and say this big thing just opened and we're proud of ourselves, we're on the cover of the paper. We also have to realize our job is to make sure that when we're getting new jobs, there's access to those jobs for people of all income levels, that they're actually hitting their performance promises on bringing jobs that are transit accessible, et cetera. Because what we're doing right now is missing the boat on so much of that. But a few things we're trying to do in Kansas City, and I will tell you straight up, it is not enough, so I don't have the cure. But one is to make sure that what we're not doing with those who are suffering from mental health or addiction is criminalizing their illness. Too often in years past, for the past generations in Kansas City, the way we dealt with these issues was if you were drunk and on a corner, right, we throw you in jail. You get out the next night, we arrest you again, we just repeat cycle. For better or worse, our jails are crowded, overcrowded, so we can't address it that way now. Now the time is crying out for us to say, let's invest in social workers, let's invest in mental health, let's invest in more resources. That's something that we're doing right now in Kansas City. And on the other end, that housing insecurity side. I grew up knowing that too, where that one bill, $200 behind, anything like that, particularly in parts of the Midwest where you have to have a car often, can leave you without the job opportunity you need. So finding ways to give small grants to folks, helping people fix up their houses in certain situations, particularly our senior population, is a way that we can keep people from ever getting into homelessness. Because one thing, this will be my final point, like you were saying, once you get into something, be it a criminalized life, be it homelessness, it is damn hard to get out. And so a big thing for us is making sure folks are never trapped in it.
Last question will go to you, Mayor Barnett, before I go to audience questions. Does Washington, D.C. respect America's mayors?
You know, if they don't, they should. And I think every day you see America's mayors proving themselves over and over. I'm incredibly, obviously I may be a little biased, but I'm incredibly proud of the record that we have in the face of many times inaction. I could go to D. Margo down in El Paso and what he's done in his city to address the immigration challenges in the face of inaction in Washington. You could go to John Cranley in Cincinnati and Mayor Kapsakevich in Toledo, what they're doing with gun measures in a red state in the face of inaction from Washington. You know, mayors understand that they can't hide behind podiums and give speeches and dance behind rhetoric. They have to deliver results. And that might sound cliche, but we can back that up with example after example of mayors, whether it be from innovative economic development solutions to harnessing innovation. All these things, I think mayors are really where the rubber meets the road. And listen, I think that mayors are respected. I mean, you've got two mayors that are doing fairly well in the presidential election. And that may not have been the case a few years ago. I think the American public respects us, and that's what I think is more important. In study after study, the level of government that people respect the most is not Washington, it's not state capitals, it's mayors and local leaders, and there's a reason. So I care more about my residents respecting me than I care about what Washington thinks, and that seems to be happening.
Mm-hmm. We'll open it up to questions. We have mics around the room. If you can raise your hand and wait for the mic to get to you and identify yourself. And if you can keep it brief so we can get a few of these in.
Hi, I'm Meghan Tracy Benson. I work for Empowering the Ages, a nonprofit based here in the DC area. And I wanted to go back to what Mayor Barnett said about playground design and really intentional design to bring generations together. Are there any initiatives that you have ongoing or that you would aim to bring to your cities that would do that in other arenas? Bringing generations together through design?
Yeah, great question. You know, we were sort of introduced to this through the U.S. Conference of Mayors and through seeing some of the relationships specifically with the AARP. They helped fund our first intergenerational playground. The success of that has had us look again through our Parks Department at how we design play in the future. So we're developing a new park called Innovation Hills. That park is designed where, 2 years ago, it would have been, I think about my kids, what's the coolest things my kids want to play on, right? Now it's a comprehensive look about being all-inclusive. We're designing Michigan's largest all-inclusive playground right now with a focus on our senior citizens. So I know that our roadmap has changed dramatically because of our first experience and the success of that. And certainly we're trying to replicate those things through the Conference of Mayors as well. AARP has been tremendously supportive of that.
Hi, my name is Anna Veria. I come from the Department of Behavioral Health. I really appreciate your mentioning about mental health issues and the opioid issues that plague us these days. Now, census data says that there has been an increase in the suicide rate among males, senior males who are 50 and above. And primarily that's because two men have less resilience in terms of change in their lives, according to the data. And women have more resilience. So in terms of actions by cities, what are your immediate actions towards these high-risk groups who are plagued with depression due to isolation?
I mean, the most direct thing we did, and the last word you said is the point, is we're trying to actually address senior isolation. And there are several different ways to do that. My internship program, while useful for us, is also useful, I think, for getting more folks that are engaged in the city and what's going on. We have a city council group that is for folks of a senior age. we get out often to make sure, particularly through the Department of Parks and Recreation, but for more of our resources to make sure we're engaging folks. In some ways, it's in the same way that you leave no child behind. I guess we're largely trying to say that we're leaving no one behind in our community, spending, frankly, more investment than we have in years past on classic community organizing. The sort of thing that is getting people out there knowing that not everybody's checking the emails that come from the city or even seeing something on the television news. And so for us, it's a story of isolation, or avoiding isolation, and building more relationships with different actors at the city and supporting nonprofits that are largely doing that in more situations.
Yes, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet TV. We talk about all the issues and challenges, but the one thing I haven't heard much about are the solutions and the best practices coming out. What would be a couple of best practices that you could share that you're really proud of that'd be helpful here, but also that we can report on around the globe? Because many of these issues, I've been in 97 countries now, and they're mostly the same issues that we're discussing here this afternoon. And thank you for being here.
So at least with regards to the aging population, because it seems like we've started really focusing there, one of the things that we're focusing on is complete streets and making sure that those streets are accessible, because some of our aging population have different needs. Making sure that we have more public places that are gratuitous so that everybody can participate in them. And at least in Topeka, with regards to solutions for the population, one of the things that has been really exciting is the merger of the traditionalists and the boomers working with young people to move our community forward. So we have really created ways that everybody has a platform and that people feel like they have access. The other big thing that we're doing is trying to consolidate our volunteering databases so that seniors and other individuals that want to be still active in our community have easy access on finding ways that they can still provide something back to their cities.
And I would say just briefly, because the question was incredibly broad, to go to the U.S. Conference of Mayors website, we all put our best practices together kind of by category, by climate, by economic development, by homelessness, and you'll see a bunch of information there about national best practices.
Hi, Donna Butts, Generations United, and for 30 years we've advocated for intergenerational solutions. I want to say kudos to Mayor Lucas for being home to one of the only grandparent apartment buildings in the country, Pemberton Park. Mm-hmm. And as you've acknowledged, there are a number of, the numbers increasing in terms of multi-generational families and intergenerational families. So I'm wondering if Topeka and Rochester Hill are also thinking about how to better serve those important families.
Yeah, I led with this. I'll just briefly say this. You know, Metro Detroit and Rochester Hill is really driven by the auto industry, and one of the conversations we're having is how autonomous vehicles isn't and shouldn't be a scary thing for our senior population. We spend so much time focused on the last mile, but most people don't realize you'll live a decade after your driving privileges are probably going to expire or be taken away. So instead of focusing on the last mile, focusing on the last decade, it's not about texting while going to work. It's about my grandma, who lives in my city, having the opportunity and the freedom and the mobility to get to doctor's appointments, to get to the grocery store. And so whether it's housing, being intentional about those conversations with the senior population in your community is incredibly important. And we found that that has just tremendous benefits for us. As now our population isn't scared about autonomous vehicles, they recognize it and they're pushing us to get it sooner so that mobility is something that's easier for them to attain.
And in regards to Topeka, one of the exciting things that we've done is AARP gave us a grant so that we could put in a brand new swing in one of our most underserved areas where you have a lot of the grandparents raising their kiddos, so that the grandparents could actually sit with their kiddos and participate in the swinging so that they could just have that access. So we're not there yet at the housing level talking about how to merge those two together, but we are doing small things in our community to start bridging people.
Mayors steal ideas a lot, so we'll be talking to Mayor Lucas afterwards.
Yes.
We have time for one more.
Hi, I'm Steve Culbertson from Youth Service America. The old model of mayors was to look at young people in their communities as the future of the community or the hope of tomorrow, future's leaders. But I think what we're seeing with young people today, I just came from the day of racial healing over at the Kennedy Center. It's clear young people are leading today, whether we're looking at Greta, whether we're looking at Emma, and the other kids down at Parkland, whether we're looking at, all kinds of issues facing the community. What will you be doing in the future as mayors to engage young people as leaders of today and of the hope of today, not the hope of tomorrow.
So I can talk about our youth council. It is amazing. Actually, Bryce Litke, who is the chair of our youth commission, is coming to be with us in the Conference of Mayors. Our youth has their own council. I'm the mayor of the council, so it's not like they have their own thing and we kind of see what they do. They set their agenda, they set their action plans, and we bring together the leaders of our community so that they could hear what they have to say and start moving their agenda forward. And it's just been amazing to see their participation and how they're shaping our community.
You know, I was going to say that, we're doing a lot more listening, particularly with a lot of our youth in the inner city. Too often the mayor or a prosecutor comes in and says, this is what's wrong, be like us. You know, one day you can be a mayor like us. Instead, we flipped that and said, what do you actually want? What do you need from this community? And then how can we put you in positions to make some change? With our short amount of time, one other thing I've done a lot of, in the city of Kansas City, we can appoint, the mayor appoints 900 board and commission appointments, which is a ridiculous number. But we have made a concerted effort to get more young people of color, more folks that have not been represented before to have a real voice. You don't have to be a homeowner to be on the planning commission, because frankly, what you think about your community matters too. And if you're going to be around for a while, it really matters a lot for us. And so that's an idea that we're really trying to focus on.
Yeah, and I would just say two things. I mean, from a local perspective, in Rochester, we have a very advanced youth council that you know, a youth council has to feel empowered, and quickly ours sits on everything from the traditional things to the committee that sets my salary. Youth are involved in that, so they're involved in every aspect of our government. But I'm really proud of what the Conference of Mayors has done, because we had our first ever youth summit this past year in Los Angeles. Our next one's coming up in Portland. And we engaged, and we had this round table that was incredible, because the issues were really interesting. From what size should your youth council be? Should you pay your youth council members? Because some folks can't, they have a job after school. It's important that they earn an income for their family, so they're not able to participate. We let students just dive into it, tear it up, mess it up, and we had a great understanding of, like, boy, our concept of what a youth council should be maybe isn't really what's effective. And just listen to them. We have the youth that will be a part of our conference this week. That'll be a major part of what we do here as mayors gathered in Washington, D.C. So we're plugged in. They aren't the future. They are right now. You see that nationally, you see that globally, and you see that in America's cities.
We've run out of time. This was a great discussion. Please thank the mayors for joining us today.